Your GM truck's oil cap might be lying to you right now. If you own a 2019 through 2024 Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Suburban, Yukon, or Escalade with the 6.2-liter L87 V8, the oil the engineers told you to run when you bought that truck is not the oil GM now says it actually needs. I've been a mechanic for over 2 decades, and I have never seen a manufacturer quietly reverse its own oil spec on an engine this popular, this fast, after this much damage was already done. Today, I am breaking down exactly what happened, why it happened, and how to check if your truck is one of the hundreds of thousands caught in the middle of it. A customer of mine, a contractor who had leaned on GM trucks his whole career, brought in his 2022 GMC Sierra 1500 Denali about a year ago because it was making a knock he described as sounding like someone tapping a wrench against the block. He had 61,000 miles on it, regular oil changes, nothing abused. I pulled codes and got a P0016, a crank and camshaft correlation fault. On most engines, that code means a stretched timing chain. On the L87, I already suspected something worse, and I was right. That truck needed a full engine replacement under warranty. He was lucky it happened in the driveway and not on the highway doing 70 miles per hour. Here is the engine at the center of all this. The L87 is General Motors' naturally aspirated 6.2-liter Ecotec 3 small block V8, standard or optional across nearly every full-size Chevrolet, GMC, and Cadillac truck and SUV built from the 2019 model year onward. It makes around 420 horsepower, uses dynamic fuel management to shut down cylinders for fuel economy, and for years it carried a reputation as one of the more dependable modern V8 engines on the market. When it launched, General Motors specified 0W20 oil for it, a thin, low-viscosity synthetic chosen specifically to help the engine slip through federal CAFE fuel economy requirements. Thinner oil reduces internal friction, and less friction means better mileage numbers on paper. That decision made sense from a regulatory standpoint. It did not make sense from a durability standpoint, and the difference between those two things is exactly what turned into a nationwide problem. Starting a few years ago, GM began seeing a spike in field reports of L87 engines developing rod bearing damage. The root cause, according to GM's own engineering findings, came down to manufacturing quality. Certain engines built between March of 2021 and May of 2024 left the factory with sediment contamination on the connecting rods and inside the crankshaft oil galleries, along with crankshafts that were not finished to the correct tolerance. When oil tries to pass through galleries that are partially blocked or contaminated with machining debris, the bearings do not get properly lubricated. Combine that with an already thin 0W20 oil film, and you get metal-on-metal contact happening inside the bottom end of the engine while the truck is just sitting in traffic. The failure pattern owners reported was consistent, a knock or tick from the bottom of the engine that got louder over days or weeks, a check engine light, sometimes transmission hesitation or surging RPMS right before the engine let go completely. And when it let go, it really let go. This was not a minor oil leak or a rough idle. Owners were losing propulsion mid-drive, some while merging onto highways, some while towing. General Motors' own service data eventually documented more than 28,000 field reports connected to the issue, roughly half of those tied to catastrophic failures where the engine stopped producing power entirely. Over 40 of those failures came with a fire in the engine bay. A dozen resulted in crashes and a dozen more in injuries. That is the part most owners genuinely do not know, because it never got the kind of coverage a defect like this probably deserved. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, opened a federal investigation into the L87 in January of last year, and by that April, General Motors issued a recall covering roughly 600,000 to 700,000 trucks, and sport utility vehicles across the 2021 through 2024 model years. Then NHTSA kept digging because reports were still coming in from vehicles built outside that original window and opened a broader investigation into another 286,000 trucks from the 2019 and 2020 model years. Put those numbers together and you are talking about close to 1 million vehicles that may be connected to this defect in some form. Here is where the oil spec change comes in, and this is the part that surprises almost every L87 owner I talk to. GM's recall remedy is not a simple part swap. Dealers are instructed to check for that same P0016 diagnostic trouble code my customers Sierra through. If the code is present, the entire engine gets replaced. If the code is not present, meaning the truck passes inspection, the technician does something much simpler. They drain the factory 0W20 oil, install a new oil cap, and refill the engine with a Dexos R-certified 0W40 synthetic, originally specified as Mobile 1 Supercar, the same racing-grade oil formulated for the C8 Corvette Z06. GM later updated its service bulletins to also allow Mobile 1 FS 0W40, a European spec formula that also meets the Dexos R requirement. Either way, the viscosity nearly doubles from what the owner's manual originally told you to run. The logic behind that is straightforward once you understand oil film strength. A thicker 40 weight oil creates a stronger hydrodynamic wedge between the crankshaft journals and the bearings, which helps compensate for a rotating assembly that may not be machined to the tolerances it was designed for. It is not magic, and it is not a repair to the metal itself. It is a mitigation strategy, buying the compromised parts a fighting chance at surviving under a thicker cushion of oil. GM even extended a special warranty covering the long block for 10 years or 150,000 miles on affected vehicles that pass inspection and get the new oil spec, which tells you how seriously they are treating the risk of a second failure even after the fix. What makes this genuinely confusing for owners is that the oil specification is not universal. If your L87 truck falls outside the recalled build window, meaning it is a 2025 model year or later, General Motors says manufacturing improvements to the crankshaft and connecting rod process were implemented by June of 2024. And those engines are supposed to continue running the original 0W20 Dexos 1 Gen 3 oil exactly as specified. Running 0W40 in an unaffected engine is not recommended either because the variable valve timing system and the variable displacement oil pump on these engines were calibrated around the thinner oil's flow characteristics. In other words, this is not a case of thicker oil being universally better. It is a targeted fix for a specific batch of engines with a specific manufacturing flaw, and the only way to know for certain which category your truck falls into is to run your vehicle identification number through General Motors recall lookup and check whether you fall under safety recall N252494001, listed with NHTSA as campaign 25V274000. If this kind of behind-the-scenes breakdown is useful to you, take a second to hit subscribe, because I go through exactly this kind of thing, what the manufacturer changed and why every single week, and most of it never makes it into mainstream car news. The financial side of this is where the phrase billion-dollar mistake actually starts to make sense. A full engine replacement on one of these trucks runs somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000 if it happens outside of warranty coverage. GM is doing these replacements under recall at no cost to owners, but multiply even a conservative fraction of that number across a recall population approaching 700,000 vehicles. Add in the warranty extensions, the labor at dealerships across the country, the ongoing NHTSA investigation costs, and the 11 separate lawsuits that were consolidated into a single class action out of the Eastern District of Michigan, and you start to understand why owners and even some GM technicians have thrown around figures in the billions when talking about what this defect is ultimately going to cost the company. That consolidated case, Powell versus General Motors, is still working through federal court, and the plaintiffs are arguing something worth knowing, even if you are not part of the lawsuit. They claim the oil spec change alone does not fix the underlying problem because thicker oil cannot correct a crankshaft or connecting rod that was machined out of tolerance in the first place. There have already been documented cases of replacement engines, the same L87, going in as warranty repairs and then failing again down the road with the same lifter and bearing symptoms. So where does that leave you if you own one of these trucks? First, check your VIN through GM's official recall site or through NHTSA directly, because plenty of owners assume they are in the clear simply because they have not gotten a letter yet, and letters have been delayed for some VINs while the investigation into the 2019 and 2020 trucks continues. Second, if your truck has already gone through the recall inspection and passed, open the hood and look at the oil cap. If GM's remedy was performed correctly, that cap should now be labeled for 0W40, not the original 0W20. If you still see 0W20 printed on a cap after a supposed recall service, that is a red flag worth calling the dealer about. Third, know the warning signs yourself instead of waiting for a light on the dash. A knock or tick from the bottom of the engine that gets louder over a short number of days is not something to drive through. That symptom on this specific engine has preceded complete loss of propulsion in real documented cases, not hypothetical ones. I want to be clear about something because I do not think this makes the L87 a bad engine on the whole. Millions of GM trucks with variations of this small block architecture have racked up 200,000, even 300,000 miles with nothing more than routine maintenance. What happened here was a manufacturing quality window, a specific batch of crankshafts and connecting rods that slipped through with contamination and tolerance issues nobody caught until owners started reporting knocks from their driveways. GM's response, tightening tolerances for 2025 and beyond, while thickening the oil for everything built in that flawed window, is a real engineering response to a real problem, even if it is not a perfect one, and even if it took a federal investigation to get there. 23 years of turning wrenches has taught me that the manufacturers rarely explain these changes clearly to the people who actually own the vehicles. They issue a service bulletin, the dealer performs the fix quietly, and the average owner never learns what the P0016 code meant or why their oil cap suddenly says something different than it did the day they bought the truck. Check your VIN, check your oil cap, and if you hear a knock from that 6.2, do not wait to find out if it gets worse. If you want to see which full-size General Motors engines have actually held up over the long haul in my shop, I have a full breakdown on that right here, like this video, if it helped you understand what is going on under your hood. Subscribe for more of these deep dives every week. Drive safe, take care of your truck, and it will take care of you.